Cool. Thanks so much, Iggy. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, South Africa. Hi, Lindsay. I saw you're in the chat as well. It's really, really nice to see some familiar faces. But for those who I haven't met before, my name's Kari Peters. Before I get started, though, I'd like to thank Iggy so much for the wonderful introduction and for inviting me to join you all today. So it's been 5 years since I last spoke at one of the UX SAs. And I'm exceptionally grateful to kind of see the community is still how I remember it. I'm still super passionate. It's really wonderful to see the familiar names popping up here and see some new faces as well. So what I'm going to do is fill you in on what I've been doing in the last 5 years. And I've got to tell you, if any one of you recognize or have heard me talk before, you'll know that I absolutely love Brené Brown. Bananas about her. And it's not just because she's a phenomenally interesting researcher and does exceptionally good work, but I really love her work around vulnerability and the storytelling that she does around her own personal stories and her own vulnerabilities. So I want to share something personal with you. I've got to be honest, I really struggled with the topic of this talk because what I was thinking is what I'm going to share with you, because it seems exceptionally difficult to distill the last 5 years of my life into half an hour. So which highlights do I choose? Which are the things that I leave out? Because to me, the entire 5-year adventure has been incredibly interesting, both from a research perspective and from a personal perspective. So what I did was, as one usually does these days, the Zoom calls, is I was listening to a company update and I was lying in my sauna blanket, and this is usually where I do my best meditation. And I was just letting my thoughts go and really scanning over the last 5 years and what those major highlights have been, what I've learned from being at Booking, what I've learned about moving to Amsterdam to this massive big company. So that's what I'm going to share with you today, is those little micro moments that were the peak emotional experiences for me over the last 5 years and the major lessons that I learned. All right. Okay, so the first lesson that I learned was really around imposter syndrome and how I tackled that. Then I'm going to talk about the major topic of this talk, is how democratization helped Booking, but also take you through how it also shot us in the foot. So we had some major challenges with this topic. Then I'm also going to talk about how being bold like Brené Brown really paid off for us in a good way, made a major shift in research within Booking.com. I'm going to take you through my contextual model, which is my baby at the moment. So I'm really passionate and excited about it. And then I'm also going to talk to you about something I learned from one of the participants who took part in our research and how it changed the way I look at the employee relationship versus doing a side hustle. But before we get there, so where does my story begin? Now, when I was studying my business science at UCT, or my degree at UCT, our communication lecturer said, you must never start a talk with a number. But today what I am going to do is I'm going to start my talk with a random number. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to illustrate the predicament that Booking was facing 5 years ago when I first joined. And many startups go through this, the teething problems of scaling. Many big companies still go through this problem as well. So in relative terms, the number usually means to business in data science and Google Analytics, something useful, something we're going to tackle, and we're going to make major business decisions from that, especially in experimentation, which Booking is really famous for. We've got an incredibly strong experimentation culture. So a number can be taken as the tribe has spoken if you're a Survivor fan, or please take off your apron if you're a MasterChef fan. And at Booking and anywhere else really, a number can also represent a part of our tribe of customers that has engaged with one of our products. And we look at this number and we have a fairly good idea of what is going on. And we make decisions from this assumption, but it's never the complete picture. So on the other hand, what we see here is a different kind of figure. This one is a human being. So it's not a number in any way, shape, or form. So this figure is a living human being. He has thoughts and he has emotions and behaviors. But I think for the sake of the talk, let's just give them a name. Justin, I'm going to pick you out because you're one of the first names I saw in our chat. So let's call him Justin. So right now, I don't know much about this human, Justin. We can tell what he's wearing. So he's wearing a snorkel, he's wearing fins. We know he's wearing black swimming trunks and a white top. Kind of looks like he's wearing a watch there as well. But besides what he is doing, snorkeling, what he's wearing, we really don't know much more about him. We don't know why he's doing this. We don't know where he's come from. And in terms of the action that he's taking right now, I mean, he may be looking for shells on the bottom of the sea. He may be looking at fish. And the thing is, we just don't know. So now if you understand the context behind why he's snorkeling, you might be able to make a business decision based on the limited information we have about him so far. So your assumption might be that he's into shells, right? So you might start a new business selling shells on the beach. You might even build an e-commerce store selling shells from this beach, which I think is actually illegal. So please don't do that, anyone. And you might also come up with another assumption that he's into sea life. Maybe he's looking at fish at the moment. So you might have another business idea. Why don't I start a sea life tourism business? So I'll take people on tours and we'll go snorkeling all around this island. All right, so next thing, you're building an online booking system for all of the Justins out there. But the truth is, you really still don't understand what the context behind the scene is, because no one has spoken to Justin yet. No one's actually had a face-to-face conversation on what's going on with him. Okay, so what if I tell you that Justin had been planning this trip for months? He comes from America. He's traveled over here with his girlfriend, and he's picked the most remote beach on the face of this planet. And 20 minutes ago, he was in a boat with his girlfriend. He was down on one knee, busy proposing to his girlfriend, and in all of the excitement, his girlfriend knocked the ring out of his hand and it went plop into the water, down to the bottom of the ocean. Luckily, it's not too deep where he is at the moment. All right, so now he's snorkeling around, crossing his fingers and hoping like hell that he's going to be able to find this ring, which cost him a couple of salaries worth. All right, so now we have context. Now we understand the circumstance behind his action, why he was snorkeling in the first place. We understand all of the factors that resulted in his action. And we understand why this matters to him. But if we didn't ask him, this would still be a completely unsolved mystery. And you'd still be sitting with a shell business or a snorkel tour business on the most remote island of the world. Okay, so we are all UXers here, UX designers, researchers. I know there may be some other roles as well. And we all get that data gives us an incomplete picture, and that it's 100% necessary for us to talk to our customers face to face and to get the full picture and the context. And I'll bang on about context quite a few times throughout the duration of this talk. All right, so we all know, or we understand that it's important to ask questions, to listen. But there is a huge debate going on in the UX industry right now. And that is around who gets to talk to the customer. All right, so designers in particular, you're probably used to hearing things like designers shouldn't do research. They don't know how to analyze information like we, the researchers, are trained and qualified to do. So researchers are calling designers not skilled enough. You're also hearing things like designers are biased. So designers are not objective enough. And you're also hearing things like designers will manipulate whatever they find into giving them the answer they want. So they're kind of looking at designers as just plain evil. I mean, I know most of the designers are thinking you're twat, but I can honestly say that I know there are a lot of designers in the house going, what on earth? What are you talking about, Kari? But the truth is, you've probably heard all of this before. This isn't new to you. And I'd love to see in the comments, I can't see them right now, so we're going to go back in the chat just after our talk. I'd love to please put in the comments, what are some of the things that you have heard around this, about people putting down your research skills because you're not a researcher? And this is an important debate. So I want to tackle the power of putting research into non-researcher hands. Okay, so I'm sorry, researchers. The fact is, designers are going to carry on doing research. That's never going to change, hopefully. Now, sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it can be a bad thing. But instead of stopping designers from doing research, let's be smart about how it gets done. Okay, so let's all pull up our big panties or our big girl panties as researchers and figure out how we can actually make the situation work better instead of having this place of conflict. All right, so what I want to do is give you a picture of how we democratized research at Booking and what worked and what didn't work. But before I do that, I want to take you into a little story about Booking. So Booking has the largest global network of accommodation worldwide. We have over 1.7 million properties at the moment. This is last time I counted, so it's probably higher than that right now. We operate across 230 countries at the moment, over almost 150,000 destinations. We operate in 43 languages. We have over 29,000 bookable rooms. And with that comes 130 million real trustworthy guest reviews. I remember when I was working at Kalahari, I was so excited that we had 1 million products on the site. So when I got to Booking, I was absolutely flabbergasted with how different the scale was. All right, we also have, and this is last time I counted, so this is pre-COVID, we had over 18,500 employees, most of them which I think were in the headquarters in Amsterdam, but we also have satellite offices all over the world. 204 offices to be exact, across 77 countries. And what I found absolutely staggering, and this is pre-COVID, just putting that out there, the disclaimer, 1.2 million room nights booked every 24 hours. All right, so this is absolutely crazy. Catching up with my slides. Just want to go back there. So if you think about it, that means we've got about, 33,000 rooms being booked every single day, or every hour, I think it was. We've got rooms being booked every 14 seconds. And I think that if I worked it out, if you had to divide how many people would book a room pre-COVID in the space of the time of us doing our talk, and you gave all of those room nights to one person here, I think they would be on holiday for about 91 years. So that's a lot of accommodation that we've got. And if you think about how long it would take to go on holiday for 91 years, I mean, that would be well into 2109 or somewhere around there. And by then, if we're still around, Booking will probably have even more properties. And if Elon Musk has got anything to do with it, they may be on completely different planets. We might even have an office on Mars by then. Possibly, we'll be operating our site or whatever it is at that stage in different languages, I mean, some of which may not even exist. What I love about Booking and being able to travel through Booking as well is that we've got over 30 different property types, so from igloos to river boats. We've got tree houses, tents all across the world, capsule hotels, camper vans, remote islands. We've got aquariums as well. It's phenomenal, the different kinds of things we've got. All right, so my rah-rah about Booking and how much it impressed me when I first joined it, that's over. But I want to give you a little idea of how the product teams are structured right now. So right now, pretty much like any product team, we have a product owner, we've got a back-end developer, front-end developer, designer, copywriter, and there'll probably be a researcher based there across a number of different teams. But now, last time I counted, we had about between 150 to 200 product owners in the business. The figure may be quite different now, but this slide that you see right now is a representation of all of the teams that we've got. So you can imagine if one researcher looks after about 5 different teams, which is the ratio that we try and stick to, you're looking at across 150 to 200 teams, probably needing between 35 to 40 researchers, which is exactly what we grew to. All right, so let me take you back a little bit in the history of Booking. How do we actually grow that big and manage to scale to where we are today? Right, so Booking was started by a Dutch guy in Amsterdam called Geert-Jan Breensma. This was way back in 1996. So he was one man, one office at his home, and one hotel, which was his first listing that came a little bit late in 1997. Then in 1998, he hired his very first employee to help him get different accommodation, different hotels listed on his site. Now, just to give you a little bit of a comparison, if anyone of you recognize the old Kalahari, that logo over there, then you're probably as old as I am. If you don't recognize the Kalahari logo, then you may be more familiar with Takealot. But I want to compare the journey and the story between Booking and Kalahari, because Kalahari at that stage was one of the biggest e-commerce players in South Africa, which Takealot is now. So Booking started in 1996. Kalahari started in 1998. All right, and then in 2002, so only 6 years later after starting, Booking started A/B testing. Now, we didn't have our own tool yet. We were using a different tool, so limited capabilities. But that's where our journey with experimentation really started. Then in 2005, so this is quite quick, 9 years after starting, Booking joined the Priceline Group. So it's an American company, and Booking became one of the world's top 10 e-commerce companies within the Priceline Group. And then in 2006, I joined MoreSport. So what I'd realized then, watching all of the different e-commerce companies that were popping up, I knew, I don't know why, I can't pinpoint to this day what it is about e-commerce that thrills me so much, but I really wanted to get into retail. I wanted to understand what it was that made e-commerce successful, a company successful, and how you could grow this beast. It was so exciting at the time. So I joined MoreSport, which is Sportsman's Warehouse, an outdoor warehouse, purely because they were in the process of starting to get their site to have e-commerce capabilities. And that took a few years, but it was the first time I actually got to work in retail and actually got to work on the websites to start turning them into proper e-commerce beasts. Then in 2008, I found out that there was a thing called UX research. It was the first time I'd ever heard about it. And having studied marketing when I did my business science degree, I was used to doing market research, but I didn't know what the difference was with UX research. So in 2008, I started doing my UX studies. And then a year later, Booking built their own ET. We lovingly call it ET. So this was our experimentation tool. And at the same time, I joined Media24 as one of their first UX analysts, which was a major deal for me, to having just studied UX research in particular, and then having been able to do what I really enjoy in my first job, or first UX job. I had been working for some time before that. All right, so then in 2010, we're back to Booking again here. Are you guys keeping up? I know it's still early in the morning, so I just want to make sure. All right, so 2010, Booking hired their first product manager of usability. Now, that's a weird title. I've never seen one of those in South Africa. You may have. But this was actually a researcher who we'd been outsourcing research to. And the only roles we already had were product managers and then the usual designers and developers. We didn't know what to do with UX research. So she'd been doing some outsourced research for us until someone said, why don't you come work with us? But the role we have is product manager. So we'll just call you product manager of usability, and you'll help our teams start learning how to do their own research. So she did that. And in 2011, we hired our first official UX researcher. Now, at that same time, Kalahari.com also hired their first UX researcher, and that person was me. Okay, in 2012, Booking grew to 4,000 employees. So from 1996 to one guy starting it, now we're in 2012, we're already at 4,000 employees, which in my mind is actually quite humongous, but you'll see in a moment how that number pales in comparison to where we grew. In 2013, I decided that I'd had enough with the corporate world, and I really wanted to start my own research company. I wanted to be able to do the kind of research that interested me most, and I was super, super fortunate. I worked with some really amazing clients on projects I absolutely loved, got to travel around Africa, worked on banking and e-commerce clients, insurance. It was one of the most fun times of my life as well. But it was tough running my own business as well. But there was a lot that I learned from that process. And then a year later, after I'd started my own research company, Booking started hiring senior researchers for the first time, really realizing that the research skill needed to develop somewhat. Now, 2015, I'd merged my company with Clicks to Customers, and that's probably where you might remember me from. And the last time I did my talks was sponsored by Clicks to Customers, and I became the head of UX over there, which was really lucky because the journey I'd been taking was kind of along the journey that Booking had been taking. So in 2016, they'd grown to 14,000 employees in Booking. And because that growth was scaling so quickly, they were looking for more researchers, more senior researchers to come and join their team. And that's when I got to join Booking as one of the 2 senior researchers within the guest research team. So that's where my journey at Booking really started. All right, so this is where my first lesson comes in around the imposter syndrome, because I arrived in Amsterdam thinking, hey, I come from South Africa. Our local e-commerce companies are small fry in comparison to Booking.com. So honestly, what do I know? What do I know about research? What do I know about a big company of this size? I mean, I'd only found out about UX research being a thing in 2008. And whenever I got a job doing what I loved in research, I never had a mentor who was above me, someone I could bounce ideas with. I never had someone who could give me feedback and let me know if my approach was on the right track or if there was a better way to think about it, or if I could do better. So besides joining Booking, because I really am passionate about travel, and because earning euros is pretty cool as well, I've got to be honest, I really wanted to belong to a group of researchers so I could grow in research, so that I could become a better researcher, so that I could be exposed to many more methods than I was used to doing. I still felt like my knowledge was completely limited in the amount of methods that I knew at that time. I'd done market research, I'd studied UX research, but I knew there were other things that I had no idea about. So it kind of turns out that over that time, there were some extremely gifted researchers in that group. They were better qualified than I was. They had been doing research for longer than I had. But there were 2 things that counted in my favor. I already had a lot of management experience from my previous jobs, and my brain was geared towards looking at the business and operations side of research. Probably, I think, because I'd studied business science, and mostly because I'd run my own company as well. So I want to introduce you to D-Scout's organization maturity model, or their assessment. I think it'll make it a little bit easier to show you exactly where Booking was, all the ticks, all the things, the stages that we were getting right at that particular moment in time when I joined the company in 2016. But if I looked at all of the gaps in what experience was research was experiencing at that time, all the ones in blue blocks that I've highlighted here, these were things that we weren't doing at all, that we really needed to get to. So around scope, I realized that most of our researchers were focused only on tactical research, and they weren't doing anything strategic. There were very, very few strategic projects that were going on. So we had no way to guide the company and the strategy vision. So I thought the solutions around that would really be to democratize research as much as we could, so we could free up researcher time to do less tactical research and more strategic research. I also knew that we needed to hire more talent, more researchers with greater skills, instead of just focusing on design research and purely just the tactical skills. And I also knew that we needed to upskill our current researchers to be much more strategic, to really expand their methodology as well. Then I looked at the approach that we took to all of our research requests that were coming in. So we were trying to execute on all the research requests that the product teams were putting out to us. We had no way of prioritizing what research is actually going to make the most impact on the business. So should I spend my time on this little tactical project, which honestly the designers could do themselves, or should I spend my time on this strategic project because the impact for the overall company will be way higher? And plus, I knew that we needed to get our research operations optimized, I'd say, is probably the best word. It wasn't really where it needed to be in terms of delivering research as quickly as possible, in terms of having the right tools in place for researchers and designers to do more research. So I knew we had to optimize that entire process and the team there. It wasn't me, actually. It was one of my research colleagues, Fernando. He came up with a prioritization process where we could all collectively put our research requests in and then wait which ones we needed to focus on and which ones would actually just go onto a parking list or not be done at all. I started working very closely with the research operations team and developing their skills and making sure that they started getting more tools for us to use. And then again, the democratization of research really helped us make that shift. So we're talking about upskilling people. Let's focus on the talent a little bit there as well, because at that stage, Booking was only hiring generalists. We needed to know everything. We needed to know quantitative research, methodologies, qualitative as well. So you needed to be a jack of all trades. And at that particular moment in time, Booking wasn't looking at previous experience. So when they hired me, they didn't bother looking at the e-commerce background I come from, or the mobile background, or the insurance or banking financial side. They really just saw me as a researcher with research skills, and we'll be able to drop this person anywhere within the business. That's how the business was operating at that stage. Designers were under the same thing. Copywriters were under the same thing. Product owners a little bit less so, because the product owners are king in Booking. Kings and queens, I have to be honest. But that's one thing I wanted to change. I wanted us to hire researchers with a specific background, strength that they would be able to apply to a particular team within Booking. So I started taking over the hiring and skills development of our researchers. And then I also knew we needed to upskill our research operations team so they could become very solid project managers and program managers to support the research team. Now, at that particular moment in time, we had been operating under an agency model before I joined. By the time I joined, I think the majority of researchers were embedded into product teams at that particular moment in time. Except for us two senior researchers, because we had the most experience, we were dotted across everything. So I think I worked across 3 different parts of the organization, which was impossible to really do that amount of work. So a lot of it was consultative. I only tackled the bigger projects. But we needed to find a way of becoming more hybrid so that when something more strategic came up in one part of the organization, we could still have our embedded model, but there would be enough researchers that we could shift around to focus on the shifting priorities of the business. And the tempo, I've got to tell you, I had major issues with the tempo. So we were incredibly thorough with every research project, whether it was a user testing project or something a little bit more strategic. We went full out. I think the standard turnaround time of any particular project was probably about 2 weeks. Was incredibly quick, but you'd be looking more close to about 2 months in terms of planning, recruiting the participants, getting the research done, and distilling all the insights and collating all the videos and writing this massive report. It was an extraordinarily long period of time. And what I wanted to do was make it quick and make it impactful. So some solutions around that were that we would do a lot more participatory research. But I think for us, one of the holy grails was usertesting.com. That was a major game changer for the business. And then output, we were writing these long reports and we were providing a lot of edited videos, but we didn't have enough junior researchers or interns to help us with this process. So whether you were a senior researcher, core researcher, no matter what kind of researcher you were doing all of that yourself, which was taking away your time to actually get research done. We started shifting that. So instead of doing the full reports, one thing I started teaching the research community to do was really to just focus on quick updates. If it's a small tactical study, let's just get the quick updates out there and insights out there. There's no need to do a massive big report around that the teams are probably not going to see. Let's just focus more on reporting around the strategic research studies that we did. And we also needed to look at the repository system. Now, my old colleague, Iman, who's since left the company, she was the other senior researcher. This was her baby. And setting up a repository where we could store all of our research reports and everyone across the company could find whatever research it was that they were looking for. I don't think we've ever gotten it right. And I know that that's also a big issue that most of us are finding is how do we actually deal with these repositories? One of my solutions around that, and this is my current baby at the moment, is the contextual model on how we tagged different information pieces to feed into different reports. And I'll tell you about that near the end of this presentation. Okay, so I'm going to glance over this. When I share my slides, you'll have this because I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview when you have my slides after our talk. If you're wondering how we solved some of these problems, here they are listed for you. So I'll make sure that E shares this out when we're done. All right, so let's just go back to where we were in the journey. So I joined the booking in 2016. 2017, because of my journey, I became a senior, so I was still doing research as a senior UX researcher, but I also became the manager of research operations. In 2018, I was still doing research as a senior UX researcher. I was still the research operations manager, but then I also became the research manager. So I had a team of researchers under me. I had the research operations team, and I was still trying to do research at the same time. So I was straddling 3 different roles. And this was purely, my title was still senior researcher as it is right now, because at that stage we didn't have different roles laid out in our booking system. And then 2019, last year, the company went through a major restructure, and we really tried to iron out those issues of what roles need to be created to really reflect the actual work that you're doing. We wanted to make sure that research was running more efficiently. So we merged all of the different research groups under customer insights. And then there were 2 different research operations teams. We merged all of them into my team. So suddenly we went from a research operations team of 4 to 9 or 10 at that moment in time. And then, well, this year came around, and who knows, this year is an amazing thing. So I know we're all thinking, what the hell is going on with this year? So let's not talk about this year, and who knows what's going to happen next year. All right, so this is the main topic of my talk, is really around bringing research to the people, so the power to the people. And this is a question I get asked most in most of the research meetups I go to, is how do we tackle the democratization of research in our business? How did we bring research to the people? So I'm going to take you through a couple of things that worked for us, why they worked and why they didn't work. One of the things was a booking benefit. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. Booking benefit is, most of us across the company really love to travel. And when you book a holiday, what the company does is they send you a form. So you can, straight after you've booked, you can fill out a form on what your experience was like. And then after you come back from your holiday, you get another form to fill out what your experience was like. And then you receive a part of your booking amount back into your salary. So it's a really great reward to have. But the problem with this is that once we grew to 18,000 employees, this was an incredibly difficult situation to actually monitor. So whose job would it be to monitor all of the reports coming in? What would be done with those reports, and how would they be funneled to the teams who needed to deal with particular issues? So what happened was it just stopped being managed. So it just became a benefit program, but not really a research program. We'd also started dog fooding. And for anyone who doesn't know what dog fooding is we were making sure that we were using our own product. But instead of just using it on going on a holiday, we would actually plan trips around particular things of interest to the business. So if there was a particular market or a particular product, hotel type or accommodation type, we would book specifically around that context of what we were looking for answers around. And we had a predefined budget on how much we could spend on transport and accommodation. And this was great because we had thousands of employees, so we could get a lot of feedback, essentially testing our own product. But the problems were, again, very similar to the booking benefit is how could we actually monitor this? Whose job would it be? How would that person be able to funnel it through to the right teams? And so what would we do with all of that feedback? And the problem is that there was no ownership. We didn't have someone who could had the time to sift through all of those reports. Plus, it was an exceptionally expensive exercise for the business when we had so many different people traveling. So thank goodness for 2020 that stopped traveling. Is just in that alone, the company is saving a huge amount of money. Then we also started open labs, where instead of just researchers using our lab and doing research, we started training up designers to do, and copywriters and product owners to do their own research. So rigorous training, we would monitor their progress, we would make sure that they had a practice run in front of us, and then we would recruit the participants for them to take part. And it was great for empathy building. It was a great solution for teams who didn't have a researcher. But the problem was the training capacity. The company was growing so quickly that every month when we ran the training, those classes were getting fuller and fuller and fuller. So we had to start doing training more frequently, and eventually we had to start just recording the training, which was a problem because if we couldn't monitor if a person was really learning the right skills, and we couldn't test them to make sure that they were now ready to go out and do testing themselves. Plus our lab capacity wasn't enough. We only had one lab, and we had 1 to 2 days a month where that lab was booked for the open lab. And then the rest of the month, we needed researchers to be able to do their research project. So we started looking for more venues around the city. And eventually we had to expand our lab so that we had 6 different rooms that we could use. Plus, I think I mentioned before, it took a really long time for us to recruit participants. So the window of doing research was between 2 to 4, sometimes 6 weeks. And we had street testing, which is a quicker way of getting feedback now. But you can imagine if there are about 100 different teams on the streets of Amsterdam trying to get fast feedback and annoying the coffee shops around the office, annoying tourists who are traveling around the office, who've now been accosted by about 5 different design groups at the same time around completely different things. So one of the things that I did was I really wanted to get usertesting.com into our business, similar to OpenLab. So I set up rigorous training, getting everyone trained up on how to use it and how to maximize the research that they could do. Built rigorous guides for them as well. But the difference between user testing was that my goal was that we wanted to get the research time down to 48 hours. We wanted to make sure that we could put the research in, we could recruit our participants, and we could get insights back within 48 hours. So my directive to my research operations team and the researchers were, if we couldn't get insights within 48 hours, it wasn't good enough. So that was our target and what we were aiming for. And this became the game changer for the entire business. I think when I was working at Kalahari, most people around the office knew me as Kari at Kalahari because it was super easy to remember how to pronounce my name. But what I've become known as booking is, you're user testing, Kari. So I was really well known across the business, but that was partially because we were using my profile name for every different designer and product owner and copywriter for a really long time until they caught on to us. All right, so suddenly we could run a much higher volume of tests and we were getting super fast results. And this is what gave researchers the time to stop focusing on tactical research and start doing more strategic research. So we could finally start having a great impact on the business. Okay, so what could possibly go wrong? I can tell you what shot us in the foot from 2 different perspectives: the organization perspective and how our headcount is determined, and also on a product level. All right, so the problem was that things started becoming a bit political because initially areas of the business who had been requesting additional researchers and please, we need more headcount to be able to hire more researchers in, they stopped coming to us. And so we already didn't have enough researchers to get all of the research studies done. And quite often we had to prioritize the research studies, which meant some research requests couldn't be done at all. So we started being perceived as blockers to getting research done. Plus, before user testing came along, researchers were still going through the old recruitment process. So we also perceived as taking too long to get research studies out there and to get any insights back. I mean, by then the product teams had moved on in many cases. All right, so this was a problem we had to solve. Because product teams were becoming super self-sufficient without us. They were doing most of their tactical research by themselves. And plus they were doing it in record time. So the challenge we had was that we already had to work a lot harder on proving our strategic value to the business, on how we could make more impact. So it was a shift in and getting that sold to product directors on the difference we can make if we focus our area on the more strategic projects. And also we had to rethink how researchers were distributed across the business, where they could make the most impact and where not. So researchers started feeling threatened at this stage, because then you started hearing things like we spoke about a bit earlier, like designers don't know how to analyze research. That was a very uncomfortable place for us to be. And then on a product level, I can give you an example of one of the projects that I worked in when I joined the payments team. Is we had two key pieces of data. We knew from our customer services data that there was a high amount of inbound calls coming because of payment-related issues. So we did a study and we found out what exactly those issues were. And then we also knew from our checkout abandonment that our rate was incredibly high. Now, I can't tell you the exact figures, but it was super high. So a survey was done by a different team. And out of the survey came a result that the reason why people weren't booking, that they were dropping off our checkout, was because they didn't have a credit card. And in that particular moment in time, to complete a booking on booking.com, you had to input your credit card details. Now, one of the other things that came out of that survey, that more or less the same amount, so I think at that stage was about 40% of people didn't have a credit card, so they dropped off the checkout. There was another piece that said the same amount preferred to pay at the property. So now if you look at that maybe as a designer or product owner, and this is exactly what happened with our team, they made an assumption that since Booking could only accept reservations with a valid credit card details, customers without credit cards were forced to leave our checkout and go directly to the property. And they would make a booking either via phone or via email directly at that property. And when they would get there, they would use an alternative payment method, whether it was cash or a debit card. And then the assumption that came out of that was, if we implement a localized alternative payment method right at the booking process, then more people are going to complete that booking, which is true. But one thing I've learned in research is never to rely on assumptions. One of the pieces of research one of the pieces of data that really bothered me was why people preferred to pay at the property, and our team hadn't looked at that. So what they were doing was they were developing this product on making people book and pay in that booking before they went on holiday. Whereas in actual fact, what our users were already saying was they only want to pay when they get to the property for different reasons, because they don't trust the properties, because they want to, especially in a hostel case, they want to check the property before they go there. And we also knew that our product really wasn't the right product for them to pay when they made their booking, because we knew that the customers we were speaking to, or I was speaking to at that stage, they needed to be incentivized. It's still very super early. I haven't had my tea this morning. So they wanted a discount, or they wanted some kind of value add, or they wanted to earn points if they were going to make that booking now and that payment now. And they also said that they didn't have enough information around refunds and how to tackle that to feel safe about making that payment now. It was only by doing that additional research, having those conversations with our customers and not relying just on that survey and the results from our data, it was then that we started realizing that the product that we were developing for our customers was the wrong product, and it wasn't enough. So the research that I did since then has started us on the path of developing a whole bunch of other products, which are the right products. And that was by having those conversations. All right, so I'm checking out time, just making sure that we've got, we're near at the end, so I think it'll be about another 5 minutes from here. All right, so I love Brené Brown. One lesson I learned from her about being bold and trying different research methodology is that she's all about empathy, listening closely to our customers. We get that. We get why it's necessary for us to have empathy, to understand what the needs and motivations are. So we don't forget who we're building our products for. And then we don't, I think, negatively impact their experience. But what Brené says is that empathy is not connecting an experience. Empathy is really about connecting to the emotions that underpin an experience. And what I'd started doing at that moment in time, because I was really, I was working with a lot of entrepreneurs, e-commerce store owners, who wanted to figure out what were those micro moments along a customer journey when they got into this, or when they first found out about their store, to making that final purchase. What were all those peak emotions that they were experiencing along the way, or that they could be experiencing along the way, to build the best product ever? So it wasn't just looking at experience, it was looking at emotions as well. And that's when I started using Brené Brown's method. She's really well known for using the grounded theory approach. It was new to me at the time. But basically what it is you start with one question. And for me, that question was, what is the ideal payment experience? And then you collect a shit ton of qualitative data. You tag repeated ideas and concepts, and you code those and group them into different categories. And then you come up with this theory. All right, so in the grounded theory approach, we're not looking for any empirical evidence. We're not trying to prove a hypothesis, and we're not trying to validate something that we've predetermined. So we let go of our own interests completely, our own assumptions and our own preconceived ideas. And we conduct research centered around what matters most to our customers. And we let our research participants know or define our research questions. So we spoke around context and how context matters. And I think that you've got an idea of how context matters from our example of Justin at the beginning of our talk, and also around how context matters in the research we were doing for payment. And this is what brings me to my baby that I'm working on right now, is the contextual model. This is a super simplified representation of what it is. But if you think about when it comes to traveling, you've got so many different factors that need to be taken into account. You've got different kinds of trip types. So you may be going on a beach holiday or a ski holiday or a foodie holiday. You've got loads of different markets across the world. I mean, we are a global company. So you may have someone who's traveling from South Africa to Amsterdam. So different cultural contexts as well. We've got different segments. We've got people who are traveling in couples, as singles, in groups and families. So a number of different segments there. And people who are traveling for different lengths. I mean, I think our most popular is over a weekend, is 2 days, but you've got people traveling for shorter than that for business reasons, for longer than that, backpacking trips for 3 months. And you've also got sort of different needs and behavior with all of those contexts. So this is what made me start developing our contextual model for the customer journey, where we're looking at what are those different factors across the customer journey. So instead of all of our researchers just chucking their research into our repository, they tag these things along the way. So every time they do a piece of research, or every time I do a piece of research, I'm tagging particular factors. So I'm tagging that the user I'm speaking to right now is going on a backpacking trip. So that's sorting out the trip type. He's looking for hostels. He is traveling to Thailand, so I know exactly what his cultural context is going to be. We also track sort of what city, what country he's coming from and where he's going, and all the different places that he's going to, that he's single, maybe for the trip now, but if he's going to meet up with his girlfriend later, we tag that as well. And then the length of journey, and then there's a whole lot more that we add, many more factors. But the purpose behind what we're doing here is that when someone comes to our research team and our community and they want to get a clear idea or a detailed view of a particular customer segment, we have a way to surface all of that information, all of that data. So we can say, we've collected this bulk of data around exactly this segment, exactly this type of customer in this context, in this particular scenario. And these are all the links to the different pieces of research that really speak to exactly that person. So we're building a much deeper understanding of who our different customers are in their specific context, because all of you will know you travel for different reasons. You may travel for business, you may travel going away on an anniversary, which is very different from the camping trip you may take with your girlfriends. All right, so that brings us back to Justin. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the product and tech organization have the ability to understand all of our customers in all of their different contexts so that we can know all of our Justins. And the very last lesson that I learned, and this came from a participant who took part in one of my research studies. So this is where I'd like to wrap it up. He said, no, at this particular moment in time, I was already a career change coach when I moved to Amsterdam. But he asked me a question in one of our research studies that made me think differently about how we earn a living and how we want to live and feel alive. And he said, so how long have you been working at Booking? And I told him it'd been about 3 years at that time. And he said, right. He said, I've got a property and I rent it out on Booking and Airbnb as well. And he said, how much is your salary? And I didn't tell him my exact amount because I was, we're not really allowed to talk about those things. But I gave him a ballpark and he said, interesting. He says, I will earn more money every month just by letting my property out on Airbnb and Booking. He said, how many people who work at Booking let their properties out as well and earn more than their actual salary? So I said, oh, interesting question. I'm not doing it. I don't know many people who are, but I knew there were some people. And that made me think about things differently, because once I started working at Booking, it was the first time in my life recruiters started contacting me as opposed to the other way around. And one of the interviews I was invited to come and join was Facebook in London. And I asked them the same question. I asked some of the research directors, how many people who work at Facebook also do their own things on the side, also manage people's ads and things like that, and how many of those people are already earning more than the salary that they earn? And she said, actually, there are quite a lot of us, because we are highly skilled. We do that on the side because it's easy. We already have that knowledge, and there are a fair amount of people who are earning a lot more on the side from that business. So instead of just working at Facebook, they also have a side income that's related to what they're doing. And then a year later, I started interviewing at Shopify, and it was the same thing. I asked them the same question. And it turned out that there were a fair amount of people who were also running their own e-commerce sites on the side. So in a sense, dog fooding, because they were testing their own products, but also because it was super lucrative for them, and they were matching their salaries. Some of them had earned a lot more and had left Shopify, but very, very entrepreneurial culture. So I think what I was really trying to get across with that is that, renting out my property on Booking wasn't a good fit for me, but I really found that e-commerce store was a great fit. I'm very shy by nature, an introvert. So for me, I don't like being in the limelight too often. So running an e-commerce store was a really good, comfortable fit. And I run sideline projects, which Iggy told you about a little bit earlier on in the introduction. Now, as a UXer, this is one thing I want to leave you with from the talk today. As a UXer, you have an extremely hard skill, whether you're a researcher or designer or copywriter or anything else. Your knowledge is your asset. So I challenge you, if anyone is thinking about a career change or thinking that times are tough, because 2020 is one hell of a year, if you're thinking about starting a side hustle or an online business, let my participants' question just roll around in your head a little bit, in your mind, and just do it. Just get that thing started today. Make that decision, whether it's an e-commerce store or a course or a coaching business. The knowledge you have, use it. There are many other ways to earn a living from doing that than just the job that you're in. And I'd love to hear more about it. So it's been impossible to distill all of those learnings of 5 years into this half an hour, which I think we've got a little bit over time with. So I apologize, everyone. But think about it. If there's anything there's so much more from the last 5 years that I would love to share with you. So if you'd like to put some things in the questions or just even have a chat with me afterwards, please reach out to me. My email address that you can contact me on is kari@9toalive.com. And in the Dutch way, we say dankjewel. So not too different from Afrikaans. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and I really hope that you enjoy the rest of today's lineup as well. Thanks, guys.
So much for the awesome.
Iggy, I've lost your audio. There, you're back, Iggy.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
I do.
Okay. Okay, cool. So the first question is, can you elaborate on what you mean by strategic research?
Yeah, so strategic research for me, and I know this is a simplified term, but anything that guides the company into a new direction. So for example, when in particular in new product development, if we're trying to decide whether we should go into a new market or develop a new product that's really going to change the direction that our company is going in, that's going to make a major impact on our bottom line, major impact on our customers, that for me is more strategic. So what's a priority for the business? Does it achieve the business's goals? Instead of just being something that we incrementally optimize. So the tactical research is maybe there's been a small design tweak here, maybe we've moved a button, maybe we've taken something out. That for me is the tactical research. And strategic research is, okay, the company's going in a new direction. How do we drive that? How do we inform that decision through research? I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. There's a few more questions, but I'm going to ask one of them, and then I'm going to ask Kari if you could maybe go through the rest of the questions, and maybe
sure,
if the guys could maybe reach out to you.
Yeah.
So the next question is, do you have any tips for identifying which solutions or ideas people would actually use when doing research? Many times the research subjects would respond positively to concepts or ideas, but it can be tricky to know for sure if they would actually adopt those ideas if they should.
Okay, so we're talking about customers. We're not talking about the product teams themselves, right?
Yes, that's what it looks like.
All right, just repeat that quickly for me. I just want to make sure I caught all of that.
So let me repeat. The first part is really the question. Do you have any tips for identifying which solutions or ideas people would actually use when doing research?
Okay, so if they're coming up with, so if we're speaking to our customers and they're coming up with particular ideas, not necessarily ideas. So I think that I liken this to Ford cars, where Henry Ford said that if he'd asked his customers what they wanted, they would have asked for a different kind of horse and cart, whereas he knew that they needed a car. So I think that for us is really coming up with what the struggles are that our customers are talking about and the things that they do really want. And it's going through that list of their needs, their wants and their issues, and then brainstorming solutions with the team on what the things could be that we could build that could solve all of those issues, all of the problems that would tie into all of the things that they want to get. And then what I would do is I would quantify that. So we quantify all of those particular ideas on before we actually ship something out in two ways. So we quantify it through research. So after we found out through qualitative research, through those conversations, we then quantify exactly how popular some of those things would be, how successful they may be. But then we also pump everything into our experimentation tool. So we know which ones are going to work and which don't. If we're not clear on why we get back a result, if it's successful, we obviously want to dig into why was that a success so we could replicate it. And if that experiment has not been successful, sometimes if it bombed so badly and we don't know why, we assumed it would be a completely different result. We go and we do more research around that to find out why did it not work out, because it might have been that our implementation of the experiment wasn't really as sort of high quality as it could be. So there are lots of different ways of tackling that question. But whoever asked me that question, do you know who it was, Iggy?
I can tell you from myself the name.
Because please get in touch with me at Kari at 9 to Alive. Also, I'm happy to share my WhatsApp details if anyone wants to just drop me a WhatsApp. So I'll tell you. I don't do this for anyone else.
Simon
Dufton. Okay, cool. Thank you. So I don't do this with anyone else. I trust you guys, though. So my number is +31 for Amsterdam. So it's +31 6113 45055. So it's +31 6113 45055. please just bomb me in WhatsApp. I'm really good at responding very quickly on WhatsApp. So whatever questions we haven't had time for, and I'm sorry I did go over time, I'd be happy to answer them afterwards. Also, Iggy, do you have a list? Are you tracking the list of questions so that I can go back and answer them and maybe send it through to you?
Yes.
Cool.
So what I'll do is I'll send you the list of questions, and I can see who the questions are from. So I'll provide you with the name and the email address.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's great. And then I'll get back to you to each person. Awesome. Thanks so much, Iggy.
I'll do that. No problem. And I'll include the first two questions that you answered as well. Maybe you want to review the answer.
Yeah, that's always helpful.
So much.
All right, thank you so much. And enjoy the rest
I'm
of the
really sorry I couldn't go through all your questions, everybody. I'm just a bit mindful of time. But Kari, thank you so much again for the awesome and insightful talk.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much, Iggy. And thank you everyone for being so engaged as well. I really appreciate it.